Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Belgium once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a couple of times before. So I've had a number of beers from these guys over the years, a few different styles, but it is fair to say that these guys stick to the more kind of traditional Belgian style of brewing, and there's nothing wrong with that, of course. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style that I haven't had from them before. It is a style, however, that I very much enjoy, and this is one of the two really special releases that these guys do actually. They can be a little bit hard to get a hold of, but in Sweden we do tend to get them every year, and this is the first time I'm getting around to actually trying these. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to a little place called Helle, which is to the southeast of Ghent in East Flanders, Oost-Vlaanderen, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, in Belgium. And that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from Brouwerij Huyghe, who sell their beers under the Delirium brand name. So yeah, this particular beer comes from their barrel-aged series. This is the black. It comes in at 11.5% ABV, and I guess the way to describe this one stylistically is as a Belgian strong dark ale, but I guess kind of akin to an Abbey quadruple as well. So yeah, this should be quite nice. This beer was released here in Sweden as part of the Tillfälligt temporary assortment through Systembolaget. They release this one every year, so this I believe is the 2022 vintage actually, if I'm not mistaken. But a few videos ago we reviewed the Barrel Aged Blonde, and it was really nice. That was one of the first kind of barrel aged strong Belgian blonde ales that I've tried before. I guess you could say a barrel aged triple actually in some instances. But yeah, that was very, very nice, very impressive. So I have to say I'm very curious to see what the more malty offering from this one is going to be like. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what it's all about. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Brouwerij Huyghe before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on the geography tagging system. So just go into the homepage, use the search bar, put your hometown, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever you like in there. If you, if I have reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. This one will be found in the Belgian beer list, but you can also check out the playlist of beers from different countries, and there are many of those there. But do give me some other Belgian beers, beer suggestions that you guys would like to see me have a look at, and we'll see what we can do about those. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then and tell you a little bit more once again about Brouwerij Huyghe. So, Brouwerij Huyghe, as if I'm pronouncing that correctly, as I mentioned to you already, are based in Helle, a small township to the southeast of Ghent in East Flanders, Oost-Vlaanderen in Belgium. So the brewery building is known as the Appelhoek, and the site apparently has been home to a brewery since 1654. But the history of this company goes back to 1902, when Leon Huyghe arrived in Helle with his wife Delvina von Durselaer, who was the daughter of a brewer. And a few years later, in 1906, he bought the brewery and named it Brouwerij Muiterij van Appel. But during the First World War, the occupying Germans took the copper kettles from the brewery, and these had to be replaced very quickly after the war ended. But from 1936 to 1939, the construction of a new brewery complex took place on Gerard Bergsteenweg, and it's still home to the main brewing hall to this day. But from then until the mid-1980s, the brewery was producing mainly kind of German-style beers, sort of Pilsner lagers and things like this. But of course there was a kind of, brewing, micro-brewing boom, if we could say, or a whole rethinking of the Belgian beer industry starting in the 80s. And so in 1985, these guys returned to brewing top-fermented Belgian-style beers under the third-generation owners. And this was Anita Huyghe and Jean de Laet. So over the coming years, the brewery acquired a few other smaller breweries. This was Artevelde Grand Cru, Biertoren, Dam from the Netherlands, and then Villiers as well. But then in 1992, Jean and Anita's son Alain took over the running of the company, and they've continued to expand under his guidance. These days, they employ around 50 people, and they're brewing around 200,000 hectolitres of beer per year. So that's somewhere in the region of 20 million, if I'm remembering my conversions properly. But these days, the beers sold by Brouwerij Huyghe include the Delirium brand, La Guillotine, Averbode, Flores, Campus, St. Irisbad, Blanche de Liège, Mongozo, Artevelde, and also Villiers. But under the Delirium brand, which we're talking about specifically in this video, there are a few different beers. There's Tremens, Nocturnum, those are probably the two easiest ones to get a hold of. There's the Christmas one, the Red Ale, there's the Argentum, the Deliria, and of course the two barrel-aged ones as well, the Blonde and the Black. There probably are a few other ones beyond that, but these are the ones that I think you are most likely to come across. But yeah, I think that's everything we can really say about Brouwerij Huyghe and the Delirium brand for the moment. So if you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and actually have a little look at this beer itself then. So as you can see, the bottle of this one is very, very similar to what we had in the with the barrel-aged blonde, pretty much exactly the same thing, the big 750 milliliter deal, but you can see the label on the top of this one is a little bit different. So you can see limited edition Delirium with the elephant there, and it's got one of these kind of screw cork openings. As we mentioned earlier, this one is it comes in at 11.5% ABV. I paid 280 Swedish krona for this one, so that is about 28 euros, something like that. I'm not sure how that compares to the price down in Belgium, but again, this was one of my kind of fuck it why not moments, because I wanted to try something quite nice for the channel. But yeah, I thought this one would be definitely an interesting beer to take a look at. So yeah, 28 euros then, about £25 sterling, and somewhere in the region of like 30 American dollars. But yeah, going to share this one with a friend, of course. But yeah, as we said earlier, 11.5% ABV, a Belgian strong dark ale, if we can call it that one, but kind of akin to a Belgian quadruple, we could say too. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Let's open this up and see what it's all about. And it does say this is the, I think I lied to you there, it says this is the Black 2021. So yeah, I guess it's been sitting for a wee while to kind of mature. Either that or that's when they actually brewed the thing. It didn't say on the homepage exactly how long they had aged this one for. Yeah, it says maturation in oak bourbon barrels provides this beer with a unique full flavour of vanilla and caramel with hints of smoked wood and almond. So yeah, there you go. Bourbon barrel aged, this one. So should be pretty damn nice. But let's get this guy open and see what it's all about. There's a little quick look at the screwy top thing for you there. Nothing too exciting about that. But let's open this one up. Let's get the cork out. So yeah, a little bit of a bang on that one. And a wee bit of excitement from this beer as we open it up. So that's how it goes sometimes. Didn't quite expect that from this one, I have to say. But yeah, I guess this one got a wee bitty excited in the bottle there. So we'll just pour this slowly, get it out. Don't know why this one got a bit more excited compared to the blonde one, right enough. But yeah, spilled a wee bit over myself there. But that's nothing particularly to worry about. So there we go. I'll just wipe it off my hands on the cover there. So anyway, there we go. Let me just take this off now. So there we are. Yeah, so anyway, now that we've got over the excitement of the slight explosion there, we can actually have a little look at the beer. So as you can see, it's kind of poured as you would expect. Now, one thing I would say about this, I was a bit surprised that they call it black, because, you know, at least for me, you guys might disagree, there's a distinct difference between brown beers and black beers for me. A black beer is like, you know, a stout, a porter, a Schwarzbier, Tmavi, something like this, something that has a little bit of black malt in it. Whereas, and I would always distinguish between the kind of chocolatey, roasty tasting beers and the more brown sugary styles like the Doppelbock, the Quadruple, the Scotch ales, the barley wines to an extent as well. So yeah, that was one thing I was curious about with this one, why they called it the black instead of the brown, but yeah, there you go. So yeah, anyway, you could see that when we poured this beer, we've poured about 350 millilitres, or something like that, into the glass now. But you can see there's about a 1/3 to a quarter finger of a frothy, I would say kind of fawn coloured head there. That's just faded down to be a very kind of thin foamy layer. But going round the edge of the glass, you can see that foamy ring is sitting there, and it's got a nice kind of medium sized bubble to it. So yeah, I do like how that goes together. But yeah, anyway, that does go together quite nicely, I have to say. But in terms of the head on this one, will fade away quite quickly, I would think, just because of the ABV of the beer. But yeah, you can see that ring around the edge of the glass is fading there, but it is fading away to just be a very thin, bubbly layer on the top. But yeah, round the edge of the glass, this one, you can see one or two big bubbles sticking to the side there. There's a few little bit of sedimentary particles floating around in this one, but colour-wise, I would actually say this beer is a very dark, sort of ruby and slightly chestnutty type colour. So that does go together quite nicely, I have to say, and kind of what you would expect from like a Belgian quadruple or a Belgian strong dark ale. The styles, of course, they are technically different according to the brewing sheets, but flavour profile wise, I would say they are pretty damn similar, actually. But yeah, remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Barrel aging and adjuncts that you put in can also affect the colour of the beer too. It depends on what adjunct you use with these more kind of brown coloured beers, to be honest with you. But yeah, black beers and stuff, it's very difficult to influence the colour of these beers. But yeah, let's have a wee look at the aroma of this one then, and see what it's all about. I think we've said everything we need to about the appearance of this beer. There's nothing too surprising about it when you consider what style it is. So let's do the aroma of this one then, and see what it's all about. Oh yeah, this is quite interesting actually. Yeah. So, this is, for me, this is pretty interesting, this one, because one thing I've said on the channel many a time over the years is that when it comes to Belgian beers, for me, I love the Belgian blondes and the triples, and I like the quadruples. I've never been such a huge fan of the Bruin or the Dubbel. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the type of kind of candy sugar and things like that they use in them, or exactly what, but I've just always felt that Belgian brown beers taste better when they're a little bit stronger. The Bruin and the Dubbel for me have always had a little bit too much of this kind of herbal, medicinally type thing going on, whereas you don't get so much of that when you go up to the level of quadruple. That's just me though. You guys, again, are very free to disagree with that, because beer is always subjective. And the reason I say this is that with this beer, when I first take a smell of it, it actually smells a lot more along the lines of like a Bruin or a Dubbel rather than a kind of quadruple, actually. So that's one thing I would say we need to kind of think about a little bit with this beer. And I'm curious to see how that's going to play out in the flavour, because at 11.5%, it certainly is at the ABV level of a Belgian quadruple. So yeah. So the way that that goes together is really quite nice. So on the we'll just start off with this one then and break it down in the way that we always do. But the beer has a bit of everything you would expect from a Belgian brown beer. You've got a bit of the wood there from the barrel, of course. You've got the kind of brown bread and cakey type things, this brown sugar, the red fruits, and a wee bit of the hoppy character. But let's just go into this a bit more in depth and break it down properly. So the backbone of the beer, you can absolutely smell a little bit of that smooth American oaky character in there. As I've said to you in many reviews before, for me there is a distinct difference between American oak and European oak. They're different species of trees. For me, the European oak is a little bit drier and almost has a teeny bit of spice to it, whereas the American oak is a lot smoother and has a bit more of a kind of vanilla-y character to it. And in this case, the American oak comes out pretty obviously in this one. You can smell that lovely smoothness in there. There's a little touch of vanilla, and yeah, there's a little touch of vanilla in there, the lovely smooth American oak, and above that you get a wee bit of the kind of the bourbon brown sugars coming out. So yeah, I do really like how that pieces together in this one. Yeah. So on top of that, then the thing is, the more that you smell this beer, the more you get the kind of bourbon barrels coming out of it actually. So yeah, you can smell the kind of bourbon brown sugar sitting in there. Above that, you start to get the actual malty side of the beer. So you've got a little bit of a kind of, you know, like the edge of a sponge cake or something like that. You've got a little bit of that in there. So yeah, a little bit of the edge of the kind of sponge cakey character. And it's almost a little bit like a kind of brandy soaked or cognac soaked sponge cake that's in there, like a brown sugar based thing. So yeah, you can certainly smell that in there. There's a little bit of a nutty character as well, and yeah, the way that goes together is certainly quite interesting for sure. So yeah, the sponge cakey notes, a lot of that kind of brandy soaked brown sugary type character, and then yeah, the way that goes together is it's really quite nice actually. But within that, you do, as I say, this is the thing that's getting me with this beer. It does have a little bit of this kind of herbal, medicinally, phenolic type character within the bready notes, the sponge cakey notes. There's a wee bit of wholemeal brown bread in there. There's a little bit of a kind of, as I say, a kind of toasty cake edge to this one. But the way that it goes together is really quite nice. So yeah, sponge cakey edge. Yeah, sponge cakey edge, you know, brandy soaked cake in this one, wholemeal brown bread, and yeah, I like that about this one for sure. On top of that, you have some kind of brown sugary notes in there. It's like a kind of slightly toasty, it is like a slightly toasty caramel, but you have got an more oily caramel on top of that. Lovely big oily sweet caramel in the middle of the nose. You've got a little bit of McVitie's digestive biscuit and stuff in there as well, and you can definitely smell a little bit of the kind of rock candy or whatever they've used in this one. So this is one of the kind of techniques you have with Belgian beers, is that they always add in a little bit of kind of extra sugar, and this is why the Belgian beers tend to be quite light in their mouthfeel with regards to the ABV in comparison to like the American craft beers, because all the sugar in those is extracted from the malt, whereas here they chuck a little bit in for the fermentation phase. So yeah, you can smell a lot of these kind of phenolic-y notes that you get out of Belgian brown beers tend to come from the candy sugar and stuff, and from the yeast to a degree as well. But on that note, I think other than saying there is a little bit of nutty character coming out of this one, I think we've covered everything we need to say about the malty side of the beer. On the hoppy side of things, there is a little bit of a hoppy character to this one, but as we said, it is a bourbon barrel aged beer. So a lot of the hoppy character, the green component, will have dropped out of this one. There's a little bit of earthiness in there, there's a little bit of herbal character. You do also have a wee bit of floral note and also a bit of a lighter kind of grassy sort of thing coming out of this one. And yeah, the way it goes together is quite nice in that sense. So a bit of the hoppy character has dropped out of this one. If you let this beer sit for a bit longer, that of course will continue as well. But yeah, it's still got a little bit of that in it, I have to say. So yeah, a little bit of the green component for me, a little bit herbal, as I say, a little bit earthy, but a wee touch of floral, mainly a grassy character coming out of this one for me. But on the fruity side of things then, let's have a wee look at that. On the fruity side of this beer, I would say that you have, on the fruity side of this beer, I would say that you've got a little bit of what would we say? You've got a little bit of a kind of raisiny sharpness to it, but underneath that you've got a bit of plum and a bit of prune, quite common things. A little bit of a kind of sultana type quality as well, and yeah, the way that that goes together is really quite nice. On the yeah, so on the kind of sultana side of things, you can smell that dry. There's a bit of oily pear in there. There's some juicy figs, some black currants and blackberries. As I say, the notes that you get out of this one are very kind of phenolic-y. Absolutely, I would absolutely say that with this one. There's quite a lot of phenolic kind of character coming out of this beer, which is really interesting too. So yeah, just pay attention to that with this one. It really is quite unusual and quite interesting from that perspective, I would say. But yeah, interesting stuff. Like I say, when we're talking about the style of this one, for me, it does smell somewhere between like a Belgian Bruin and a Belgian Double. I don't think it's got quite the depth to it, if that makes sense, that a Belgian Quadruple has. It's not quite as big and brown sugary in that sense for me. Or the brown sugars aren't quite as rich, is maybe a better way to put that. So yeah, as I always say, take a wee bit of time to ponder over the aroma of your beers before you get stuck into them. But I think it is about time that we try this one. So yeah, this one is the Delirium Barrel Aged Black, as they're calling it, and 11.5% Belgian Strong Dark Ale from Brouwerij Huyghe in Helle, just outside of Ghent in Oost-Vlaanderen, down in Belgium. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers, proost, santé. Oh yeah, you can feel in the mouth with this one, the carbonation is certainly a little bit more active, and that would give us an idea of why this beer exploded on us slightly. It didn't explode too badly compared to some other Belgian beers I've seen, but yeah, it did a little bit. Of course, it's maybe just been sitting for a wee bit too long in the shop and things. I don't know what temperature, of course, Systembolaget and things would store it at, but that's another story. But yeah, you can feel a little bit of the nice prickle carbonation on this one. To be honest with you as well, one thing I would say is that the aroma always gives you an impression of what the beer is going to taste like, and in this case the beer is very much like its aroma. We can certainly say that. But yeah, this is nice. It is very much, pardon me, like yeah, it is very much like a kind of like a barrel-aged Bruin Double type thing. I think I said the same to a degree about the blonde barrel-aged as well. It didn't quite have the kind of big stickiness and depth to it that you would get of a triple. It was really more like a kind of slightly stronger blonde. But I think the blonde one was a bit closer to the triple than this one is to the quadruple. Actually, this one really is characteristic. It's somewhere between the Bruin and the Double for me, actually. So yeah, it's a nice beer and it is enjoyable actually. But like I say, it's just not quite what I expected. I thought this one was really going to be more like a kind of quadruple type beer. But yeah, let's just break the flavour of this one down and describe it for you a wee bit more. I will be honest from the outset and say that I think out of the two barrel-aged ones, I think I do prefer the blonde one. Actually, I will say that, maybe because it's a wee bit more unique, but the smoothness and bourbon characters you got out of that were absolutely lovely. But as I've always said, I've always preferred blondes, triples and quadruples to the Bruins and doubles, so that's maybe the reason why I would come to that conclusion. But anyway, break the beer down, describe it as we always do. Middle third of your palate, you can feel the backbone of this beer. You've got that lovely smooth American oak from the bourbon barrels just sitting there, so you can feel that in this beer. As you move, as you go further forward toward the front of that middle third of your palate, then you've got a nice little bit of a kind of more vanilla type character coming out of the beer. but then you can feel above the wood, you've got those bourbon sugar notes actually. So yeah, that is pretty nice for sure. And on the on top of the bourbon sugars actually, they kind of come out a little bit more into the aftertaste. The beer kind of dries out the further into the aftertaste you go, and you get more of the wood, the vanilla, and the bourbon sugars. But initially, what you'll find is that the actual brewing, the brewing double type character of this beer, actually, it actually kind of suppresses a little bit of the bourbon brown sugars, I would say. So yeah, pardon me, let's move into the kind of malty side of the beer then. So you can feel that above the above the bourbon brown sugars, you've got a little bit of the kind of cakey edge to this one. So you can feel it's not like a highly caramelized cakey edge, you know, like the stuff that gets stuck to the bacon tray afterwards. But yeah, it does still have a wee bit of that that edge in there. So yeah, you've got that nice kind of cakey edge. Then above that, you can feel there's a little bit of a sponge cakey type character. There's kind of a brown sugar soaked sponge cake, a little bit of a cognac soaked, bourbon soaked, cognac soaked, brandy soaked type thing. So you've got that nice kind of brown sponge cakey layer. Then above that, you get a little bit of the kind of wholemeal, kind of brown bready character as well. Within those cakey and brown bread notes, you start to get a little bit of the nuttiness coming out of the beer, which is nice, particularly toward the front of that that middle third of the palate. Above the bready notes, you get the kind of brown sugary character as well. So yeah, the brown sugary character that comes out above that, it's not, you know, it's interesting for me in this one because it has got a little bit of a leathery character, and usually if you've got leathery brown sugars in your beer, that indicates a slightly longer wort boil. But in the case of this one, I don't think it does actually. I don't think they use particularly long wort boils when it comes to Belgian beers. But yeah, you can certainly feel you've got a slightly more leathery brown sugary kind of character in this one, and this is maybe due to the candy sugar, right enough, that they no doubt add into this beer. So you've got that leathery brown sugary layer. Above that, there's a wee bit of a more toasty brown sugary layer, and then you get the kind of the treacle. You get a little bit of this almost treacly well, no, it's actually more of a kind of sweeter caramel there, and then in the dead centre of your palate, where the alcohol is coming out, you've got that more. You have got that more. You do have that more treacle molasses depth to the beer. So yeah. So yeah, the way that this one goes together is quite nice. And then above the brown sugary notes in this one, you have the kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity type quality to the beer, which is quite nice. So you can feel that little biscuity character just sitting above all those brown sugary notes that I mentioned there. So the brown sugary notes in this one are very, very complex because of the bourbon barrel. You've got that little bit of cakey bready character in between, then all the other complex brown sugars there. But in honesty, I think that kind of describes the middle third of your palate in this beer quite well. So let's go on to the back third of the palate then. As I've always said, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back on the palate compared to the sweeter flavours that come out further forward. So yeah, on that back third of the palate then, you can feel the base of that back third of your palate. You can feel the woody character in there is a little bit drier. On top of that, you've got the bourbon brown sugars, which feel a little bit dry and a little bit more toasty, incidentally. and then you get the how would you say? On top of that, you get a little bit more of the kind of you get the kind of cakey notes coming out of the beer, so you can feel that sort of dry cake edge that was picking up in the middle third of the palate. That's there, and definitely a little bit more dry. It has got a wee bit of this kind of phenolic-y character to it as well. Then you can feel above that you've got this sort of brown sugary bourbon, brandy, cognac soaked cakey layer there. That's there. It's a little more light and airy. You've got the kind of wholemeal brown bready notes sitting above that, and then you get the kind of more you get this more kind of grainy brown bready edge just sitting above that one too. So the way that everything kind of pieces together in this beer, I think, is really quite interesting. But above all of that, you have this really nice. You do have this really quite nice yeasty character coming out of the beer. So for me, the yeasty notes on that back third of the palate, you've got a lovely little bit of, I would say, you've got a lovely little bit of this kind of more, what's the word? You've got a lovely little bit of this more kind of light, airy, kind of almost farmhousey brown bread in there. But it's quite a sweet farmhousey brown bread. There's a little bit of wood to it, a little bit of cracker. Then you have the kind of honeycomb notes, and it's quite a rich honeycomb coming out of this one as well, which is really interesting. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that sense is quite interesting. But definitely on that back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, the flavour just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, I like that about this one. Yeah, let's go on to the kind of hoppy side of things then. So in the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. As I said earlier, the green component of this beer will drop out the more that you age it and so on, and it's already bourbon barrel aged, so bear that in mind. But yeah, you definitely have a little bit of earthiness in there, and as you move further forward, it's got a little bit of herbal character, and as you push toward the kind of front corners of the palate, it's a little bit more kind of floral and aromatic as well. So yeah, the way that that goes together is really nice. But round the front curve of the palate, you get a little bit more of you get a little bit more of the kind of lighter, zesty, kind of grassy character coming out of this one. So yeah, the way that that goes together is quite nice as well. But yeah, around the front curve of the palate, definitely a wee bit more of a zesty grassiness, but overall it's kind of wet, the green component in this beer, and quite smooth and a little bit dry. So yeah, the way that that goes together is pretty nice in this one, I have to say. So it gets a thumbs up in that regard. But yeah, on the front third of your palate then, I would say that the I think we've covered the green component. Let's go on to the kind of fruity side of the beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up in there. Kind of sweet, light, brown bready character for sure. But then the base of that front third of your palate, you can get the smooth kind of bourbon wood coming out of this one as well. You get a bit of the bourbon brown sugar sort of sitting on top of that too, which is a little bit, yeah, you can get more sweetness out of it there. Then you've got a wee bit of the kind of, you know, brandy soaked cakey type thing, and above that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll the way out of the beer. But I should also say that on that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get the, with the kind of cakey build up there, it has that sort of phenolic type note that comes out of it, and that's really interesting. Yeah, the way that this beer goes together is really is pretty it's really quite interesting in that regard. But let's look at the fruity side of things just to round off this tasting section. So for me, the fruity side of things you get in this beer, when you take the beer in, you have got a little bit of that You do have a little bit of a kind of raisiny sharpness comes out of the beer at the top. Underneath that, you do get a little bit of juicy plum, but then for the most part, this beer is leaning toward the kind of drier side of the fruity spectrum. So you've got prunes in there. Underneath, yeah, you've got the prunes in there. You've got a nice little bit of so you've got prunes. You've got a little bit of I would say you've got a little bit of a kind of datey character in there as well, and then maybe some sultanas, you know, dry white green grapes. Then as you move further forward, you've got a little bit of kind of, I would say, yeah, you have a little bit more of a kind of you get a little bit more red fruit out of it. You start to get a juicy kind of figgy quality, and then as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, you get a little bit more like black currant underneath. And then, yeah, a little bit more kind of oily blackberry sitting on top. So, yeah, the way that that goes together in this one is quite interesting. The fruity character, as I say, it's very phenolic, leans more toward the dry side of things, and definitely flavour profile wise, this beer, it really is more akin to like a Belgian double or Bruin than it is to a quadruple. But you know, obviously we've got that more generic term, Belgian strong dark ale, that can be applied to this one. But yeah, I think the description I've given it gives you a bit more reference, to be honest. But yeah, an interesting beer, this one. Like I said earlier when I first tasted it, I do think I prefer the blonde version of this to the dark one. But it's certainly nice to try this beer and see how it goes together. So this really is like a very strong, like it's more like a double, I think, to be honest with you, rather than anything else. So it's like a bourbon barrel aged double beer. This one is probably a good way to describe it. But yeah, let's just round off the review then with a wee quick look at the mouthfeel. So for me, this beer, it's quite, I would say that it's kind of top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied. The carbonation had a little bit of a prickle in the beginning, but it has settled down a little bit now. I guess that'll happen over time. So yeah, it has settled down, has kind of come together, and then you have that nice, I would say that overall it's quite slick and quite oily tasting beer, this one. You get a nice little bit of dryness and stuff out of it as well. In terms of IBUs, I think it's maybe about 20-ish IBUs. You get quite a little bit of dryness out of the woody character and the sort of phenolic type notes as well. But then in the malt base, you've got your woody dryness underneath, your brown sugars, your sweetness. Also a little bit of, also just the kind of brown sugary notes sitting on top of that. And then you've also got the kind of fruity characters coming out of this beer as well. And the fruity notes for me are quite oily, and again quite dry, but yeah, the way that everything goes together in this one, I think, is really quite interesting. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together is really quite nice. It's like I say, describing this as a bourbon barrel aged double or bourbon barrel aged broom beer is probably a very good way to kind of summarise this one very, very quickly. But yeah, I enjoyed trying this one. Like I say, I probably prefer the barrel aged blonde, but this is still another very, very solid beer. If you like your Bruins and your doubles, you will enjoy the flavour profile of this one. I'm a little bit more of a quadruple fan myself, so it's not quite as rich in the brown sugars as I would like, but still a very, very nice beer actually. So I think we can leave it at that for this one. This was the barrel aged black, coming in at 11.5% ABV, a Belgian strong dark ale from Brouwerij Huyghe, and their Delirium range from Helle, Oost-Vlaanderen down in Belgium. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brouwerij Huyghe as well. And we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the near future. But until then, Slàinte, Scott, cheers, Proust, Santé. Check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you guys in the next review.